The palace had seen its share of whispers. But never a morning like this. Royal guards stood in tighter formation than usual, their boots echoing against stone floors as if the walls themselves sensed a seismic shift. And then, without warning, the announcement Britain never imagined arrived. King Charles, steady yet emotional, declared Princess Catherine the new Queen Consort. While Camilla's role was formally concluded, but why now? What happened behind those sealed palace doors? And how did the royal guards become silent witnesses to a moment that will rewrite royal history forever? Before we dive deeper into this extraordinary royal twist, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell. It truly helps our royal community grow. And if you love emotionally rich, true-feeling royal stories, don't forget to share this video with others who follow William, Catherine, and the monarchy's most dramatic moments. No one who walked past Buckingham Palace that morning could explain why the air felt strangely heavier, as if the stone walls themselves were holding their breath. Even the pigeons that usually fluttered noisily across the courtyard seemed to move with an odd, uncanny caution. But the royal guards were the first visible sign that something historic was preparing to unfold. Their movements were sharper, quicker, and more frequent than the standard ceremonial routine. Boots struck the ground with crisp, echoing certainty, and the polished red coats gleamed in the pale light of dawn. To an outsider, it might have looked like a simple shift change. But the seasoned observers, the journalists, the royal watchers, the staff whose eyes had learned to read the smallest hints, knew immediately that this was no ordinary day. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was even more intense. Courtiers hurried through narrow hallways, clutching sealed envelopes and folders marked with gold-embossed crests. Their expressions were solemn, almost reverent. They spoke in hushed tones, as though raising their voices might disrupt the fragile balance of history being written in real time. A few exchanged quiet nods, acknowledging that they were witnessing something unprecedented, something future generations would study, dissect, and retell. At the heart of this storm of movement sat King Charles III. He was alone in his private study, a room lined with portraits of monarchs who had ruled before him, some celebrated, some criticized, all remembered. The king had spent countless nights thinking, rethinking, doubting, circling back to the same realization: the monarchy was changing, the world was changing, and he needed to make a decision that balanced tradition with truth. In front of him lay a single document, ordinary in appearance, extraordinary in consequence. His hand hovered over it, fingers trembling just slightly. Not out of fear, but out of the awareness that this moment would echo far beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, gathering himself. A king was allowed to doubt in private. A king was allowed to feel. But once he stepped out of that room, he needed to embody certainty. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Your Majesty," a familiar voice said from behind the door. It was his senior private secretary, a man who had served the crown for decades and understood the gravity of this moment better than most. "The advisors are assembled." Charles inhaled deeply. "I'll be there shortly." As the door closed again, his gaze drifted to the window. Down in the courtyard, the royal guards stood in their formation, shoulders, stiff eyes forward, discipline unshaken. But even the king noticed the extra tension in their stances. They knew something was happening. Guards always knew. They were like the heartbeat of the palace, steady, silent, loyal, but sensitive to the faintest shift in rhythm. He rose from his chair, smoothing the front of his jacket, and stepped into the corridor. The palace suddenly felt colder, as though the marble floors themselves sensed the weight he carried. His footsteps echoed softly, each one pulling him closer to the chamber where the royal advisors waited. As Charles entered the room, every advisor stood. No one spoke. They simply watched him with a mixture of curiosity, concern, and readiness. The king took his place at the head of the long, polished table. "We begin," he said. He didn't waste time. He explained the reasoning behind his decision with clarity that surprised even his closest staff. He spoke of duty, of evolution, the monarchy's responsibility to remain not only symbolic but relevant. The advisors listened carefully. Some nodded in agreement. Others frowned, not out of opposition, but out of the weight of understanding what this decision meant. It would change the public's expectations. It would redraw roles. It would set a precedent. And Queen Camilla? One advisor asked cautiously. Charles paused. This was the question everyone had been quietly avoiding. Camilla has spoken with me at length, he replied. Wishes to step back, not out of resentment, but out of understanding, out of love for the institution.
The room fell silent. And Catherine? Another advisor finally asked. Here, the king's expression softened. Catherine has proven herself beyond measure, in grace, in dedication, in connection to the people. She is ready, even if she does not fully know it. There it was, the truth at the center of all this movement, all this tension, all this history. Princess Catherine was to be elevated to Queen Consort, not someday, not eventually. Now, after the meeting concluded, word quietly rippled through the palace staff, not as gossip, never that, but as a hum of emotion. Some staff members had grown up watching Catherine's journey from university student to duchess, from duchess to princess, and now they would witness her next chapter, a chapter no one had predicted so soon. Outside, the royal guards adjusted their formation again. One of the younger guards, barely 20, swallowed hard. He didn't know the details, not yet, but he sensed a magnitude in his bones. Palace guards weren't just symbols of discipline. They were living barometers of royal life. If the palace breathed differently, so did they. Meanwhile, Catherine herself was in a separate wing of the palace, unaware of the precise moment the final decision had been inked. She had sensed the tension earlier, of course. She had seen the hurried steps, the whispers, the glances that avoided lingering too long. But she assumed it was related to state matters or parliamentary discussions. Never this. As she moved quietly down the hall, she noticed two guards shift slightly as she passed. A small gesture, but one that signaled respect at a higher level than usual. She hesitated for a moment. Something was happening. When William found her a few minutes later, his expression said everything before he even spoke. "Catherine," he said gently, "Father has made his decision." Her heartbeat quickened. She wasn't ready for what her mind immediately feared. But William stepped closer, taking her hands, grounding her. "It's you," he whispered. "He's chosen you." The world seemed to slow. The walls, the portraits, the long corridor, everything blurred around her. She felt the weight of the moment like a warm, heavy cloak settling across her shoulders. Not fear, not shock, something deeper, something steadier. "It's time," William added softly. Outside, the guards resumed their immaculate stillness. Inside, history shifted. The palace no longer felt like it was holding its breath. It felt like it was preparing to speak. Camilla had always known that life inside the monarchy came with storms, some loud and public, others silent but far more exhausting. But lately, the strain had begun to show in ways she could no longer ignore. She felt it in her breath each morning, in the heaviness behind her ribs as she prepared for engagements, in the sudden weariness that followed even the simplest day of duties. She was proud of the role she had stepped into, but she also knew the truth. Being Queen Consort was a marathon, not a sprint, and she had run longer than she ever expected she could. Weeks before the final decision was made, she had visited King Charles in his sitting room, not as queen to king, but as wife to husband. He looked up when she entered, sensing immediately that something weighed on her. "Charles," she began gently, taking a seat beside him, "I want to speak before this becomes harder." He set aside a stack of briefing papers, suddenly alert. "Is something wrong?" She smiled faintly. "Not wrong, just inevitable." Her fingers traced the arm of the sofa, thinking through her words. "I've been carrying this role with everything I have. Truly. But I feel the limits now. I feel them in ways I didn't before. And I fear if I keep pushing myself, I will begin failing at the very duties I have worked so hard to honor." Charles's expression softened, though a shadow of concern crossed his eyes. "You've been under immense pressure." "It's not pressure that worries me," she replied. "It's time. I'm 76, Charles. The demands will only grow. And Catherine, she is the future. The country already looks to her with a kind of hope I could never inspire. A softer light, a different kind of leadership." Charles said nothing for a long moment, but his silence was a rejection. It was recognition. "You're certain this is what you want?" he asked, voice low. Camilla nodded. Yes, and I want to do this gracefully, on my terms, while I still have strength and dignity to step aside without chaos. There was relief in her eyes, but also something more human. Peace. Charles reached over, taking her hand. You've served with loyalty and resilience. History will remember that. And history, she said quietly, will need Catherine. That conversation, gentle but monumental, planted the seed for the shift that would later shock the world. But behind palace doors, it was simply two people accepting the truth of time. Meanwhile, Catherine had sensed change in the air long before anyone spoke a word to her. She felt it in the sudden increase in briefings she was quietly included in, the deeper explanations she received from senior advisors, the way engagement she once shared with Camilla now occasionally fell solely to her. These subtleties were not mistakes. The palace never operated on accident. Yet Catherine never assumed anything. She carried a humility that made her almost underestimate her growing role. She simply worked harder. She began rising earlier, giving herself time to read reports, review diplomatic notes, memorize details of charities she championed. She practiced speeches late at night, long after William urged her to rest. But she insisted on mastering every word, every inflection. She did not want to disappoint the people who depended on her. One morning, as she stepped quietly through the palace's eastern corridor, she crossed paths with Camilla. Unexpectedly, at a moment when both women were alone, Camilla stopped her gently. Catherine, darling, walk with me? The invitation held a softness that instantly told Catherine this wasn't routine. They moved toward a quieter sitting room overlooking the gardens. The late afternoon sun cast long golden streaks across the carpet, and Catherine felt her heart quicken, not out of fear, but out of anticipation she didn't dare articulate. Camilla placed a hand over Catherine's. I want you to hear this from me, before anyone else says it. Catherine's breath caught, but she stayed steady. I am stepping back, Camilla said simply, not retiring from life, but relinquishing responsibilities I can no longer carry with the strength they require. Catherine stared at her, stunned. Camilla, I had no idea. Oh, my dear, I know you didn't. Camilla smiled gently. That's one of your strengths. You never assume. You always focus on the service, not the status. Catherine swallowed, unsure what to say. Camilla continued. King Charles sees your potential. The country feels it. And I believe in it. There was a shimmer of emotion in her eyes. Pride, relief, and acceptance all at once. This crown, Camilla said softly, is not just metal and jewels. It is a weight. But in your hands, it becomes something lighter, something hopeful. It becomes a promise. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes, though she blinked them away. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything yet, Camilla assured her. Just be ready, because your life is about to change, and the nation will look to you in ways they never have before. That night, Catherine sat alone in her room, staring at the faint reflection of herself in the window. The gardens outside were still, lit only by dim lanterns. She touched her fingertips to the glass, her mind racing through possibilities she wasn't fully prepared to confront. Queen Consort. The title felt surreal, distant, almost too heavy to speak aloud. But beneath the weight of it was a quiet resolve, a sense that she had been walking toward this path for years without realizing it. She thought of her early days as William's girlfriend, when photographers swarmed her outside lecture halls, and she was just a girl in jeans and a ponytail trying to finish a degree. She thought of her wedding day, where she felt both fairy tale joy and crushing responsibility. She thought of her first public speech, her shaking voice, her sweaty palms, laughable now, compared to the calm poise she had grown into. Every moment, every challenge, every criticism had been shaping her. She didn't seek power. She never chased the spotlight. But somehow, the spotlight had chosen her. A soft knock pulled her from thought. William stepped in, warm and steady, the one constant in her whirlwind life. He sat beside her, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. How do you feel? He asked quietly. I don't know, she admitted. Honored, scared, responsible, all at once. That's how every great leader begins, he murmured. She leaned into him, allowing herself one fragile moment of vulnerability. Will you be with me in all of this? She whispered. Always, William answered. I walk with you, every step. The next days unfolded in a blur of private conversations, constitutional briefings, and long hours of preparation. Catherine absorbed everything: protocols, precedents, legal structures, ceremonial duties. If she felt overwhelmed, she didn't show it. Her grace, under pressure, astonished even the senior advisors. Camilla watched from a respectful distance, no trace of bitterness, only pride. She had passed the torch to the right hands. And as Catherine stepped closer to the moment Britain would meet its future Queen Consort, one truth became undeniable. She wasn't just ready for the role. She had grown into it. For hours before the official briefing, the palace press hall buzzed like a hive struck by a sudden burst of energy. Reporters from every major network packed themselves into rows of seats, adjusting microphones, whispering theories, and refreshing their devices in case something, anything, leaked before the official moment. They had covered royal weddings, royal births, royal controversies, but what was about to happen felt far bigger. It felt like the beginning of a new chapter in the monarchy, the kind people would talk about decades from now. Outside the palace gates, crowds gathered in rising waves. Some held Union Jack flags. Others just held their breath. The royal guards had tightened formation across the grounds, their stillness contrasting sharply with the excitement swirling just beyond the iron bars. Even the air carried an unusual electricity, the kind that precedes something historic. At precisely 11 a.m., the heavy double doors at the back of the press hall opened, and the room fell silent. King Charles III entered first, wearing his formal military uniform, every metal gleaming under the lights. To his left walked Camilla, serene but undeniably subdued. To his right, Catherine, dressed in a deep navy ensemble. The Princess of Wales moved with her usual grace, though those who watched closely could see a new kind of steadiness in her walk. Something quiet, something resolute. Flashbulbs exploded. Gasps whispered through the crowd. The king reached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and took a moment to scan the room. He wasn't just addressing journalists. He was addressing the world. My thanks to you all for being here, he began, voice strong but lined with an emotion that hinted at the magnitude of what he was about to say. Today marks a moment of significant evolution for Crown and for the future of this nation. Eyes widened. Pens hovered over notepads. Cameras zoomed in. Charles continued, speaking slowly, deliberately, each word carrying weight. For the last year, I have reflected deeply on the responsibilities of the monarchy in a rapidly changing world. With changing times, we must make decisions that strengthen stability, continuity, and service. It is with careful consideration and with the support of my family that I announce a transition of roles within the monarchy. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Catherine stood perfectly still, her posture dignified, her expression composed, but her eyes reflected the gravity of the moment. Camilla looked ahead, her hands clasped gently, exuding quiet acceptance. The king's next words landed like thunder. Today, I formally elevate Catherine, Princess of Wales, to the role of Queen Consort of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth realms. Chaos erupted, not with disrespect, but with shock, with disbelief, with astonishment. Cameras clicked so rapidly they sounded like rainfall. Reporters shot to their feet, their voices colliding. Your Majesty, is this constitutional? What prompted this decision? How will this affect the line of succession? What role will Queen Camilla now hold? The king raised a hand. Silence returned. Uneasy, trembling, charged with kind of emotion even seasoned journalists rarely felt. Queen Camilla has requested to step back from full public duties, he continued, turning slightly toward her. Her years of service have been invaluable and her dedication unwavering. She will transition to the honorary role of Queen Mother Emeritus, offering guidance, wisdom, and continued support to Crown. Camilla nodded gently, her expression warm but tinged with the natural emotion of closing a long and complex chapter of her life. Then Charles turned fully toward Catherine. And Catherine, he said softly, but loud enough that every microphone captured his words, has demonstrated exceptional devotion to duty, to this country and to its people. Her elevation is not a replacement of the past, but a promise for the future. Catherine inhaled deeply. She stepped up to the podium, her hands resting lightly on the edges. For a moment, she simply looked out at the sea of faces. Reporters who had covered her since she was a young bride now watched her with a mixture of awe and curiosity. Some even looked emotional, as if aware they were witnessing not just a royal shift, but a human transformation. "Thank you," Catherine began, her voice clear and warm. "I am deeply honored by His Majesty's trust, and by the responsibility I am accepting today. My commitment remains what it has always been: to serve, to listen, to support our communities, and to uphold the values that define our nation." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't overpolished. It was Catherine, authentic, grounded, relatable. And that authenticity carried more power than any carefully scripted speech. Outside the palace gates, cheers rose from the crowd. Some people cried. Some simply clapped. Others embraced strangers, caught in the emotional sweep of history. Back inside the hall, questions resumed, but the tone had changed. The initial shock had softened into something more human, more respectful. A few reporters even stepped aside to capture the reactions of royal guards standing outside. The stoic soldiers hadn't moved, of course, but those who looked closely noticed it. A subtle tightening of the jaw, a deeper pride in their eyes. They had witnessed shifts of power before, but this one carried a rare emotional gravity. Meanwhile, online, the news detonated across every platform. Catherine becomes new Queen Consort. Camilla steps back. Royal family enters new era. Millions of comments poured in within minutes. Some shocked, some celebratory, some confused, all electrified by the moment. Diplomats around the world issued statements of congratulations. Commonwealth leaders expressed support. Foreign royals sent private messages. Even global celebrities began posting tributes, highlighting Catherine's years of quiet service and dignified leadership. Inside Buckingham Palace, the King, Camilla, William, and the newly named Queen Consort stepped away from the press hall and gathered privately for a moment of stillness. History had just shifted moments earlier, but now came the part no cameras could capture: the emotional exhale. Camilla approached Catherine first. She took her hands, looked into her eyes, and said only 4 words: "You will do beautifully." Catherine nodded, eyes shining. William stepped forward next, gently placing his hand at the small of her back, grounding her, supporting her. "You've earned this," he whispered, "every step." And the guards, standing tall outside under the cool daylight, adjusted their formation one last time, signaling the beginning of a new royal era, one defined by grace, unity, and the woman who had just stepped into history. The day Catherine was named Queen Consort, something subtle shifted across Britain, not just in headlines or television broadcasts, but in the quiet places where people's emotions live. From cafes in Edinburgh to small villages in Cornwall, from busy London streets to homes across the Commonwealth, people paused and absorbed the news. Some celebrated, some simply sat in awe, and some, especially the older generation, whispered to themselves that history was repeating, yet evolving. Inside Buckingham Palace, the aftershocks of the announcement continued long after the press hall had emptied. The Royal Guards, a regiment trained to show no emotion, carried themselves differently as they resumed post. Their movements remained decisive, but there was a new kind of firmness in their stance, a deeper meaning behind every synchronized step. To guard a princess was an honor. To guard a queen, that was a legacy. One senior guard, Sergeant Hale, had served during William and Catherine's wedding, during the birth of their children, and now, during this historic shift, he quietly told the younger guards that they would remember this day long after they retired. "You guard walls," he said, "but you also guard moments. Today is one." Meanwhile, within the palace, Catherine's transition was unfolding at a pace that felt both overwhelming and strangely natural. The corridors she had walked for over a decade looked different now, not physically, but symbolically. Every greeting from staff carried deeper respect. Every bow lasted a fraction longer. And every room she entered shifted temperature ever so slightly, as though acknowledging her new responsibility. Her first private audience with King Charles following the announcement was intimate and emotional. They sat across from one another in the king's private study. No cameras, no advisors, just two individuals bound by duty. Charles, who had spent most of his life preparing for the pressures of the crown, spoke with unexpected softness. "My dear Catherine," he said, leaning slightly forward, "this role is not a title. It's a weight, a compass. And I chose you because I've seen how you carry the world when no one is watching." Catherine's eyes glistened, but she did not look away. "I won't fail the crown," she replied gently, "and I won't fail this family." The king's expression warmed. "You already haven't." But while the palace settled into its new rhythm, the world outside was only growing louder. News channels ran nonstop coverage. Experts analyzing constitutional implications, royal biographers predicting long-term impact, and commentators debating what this shift meant for the monarchy's future. On social media, Catherine became the most searched person in the world within hours. Her first speech as Queen Consort had resonated deeply, not because it was grand, but because it was human. Still, not everyone reacted the same way. In certain corners of the nation, tradition-heavy voices worried about changing the structure of the monarchy. In others, especially among younger generations, Catherine's elevation felt refreshing, like a needed step forward. Yet the clearest reactions came from those closest to her, the people she met during royal engagements. When Catherine visited a children's hospital just days after the announcement, the staff didn't address her differently. They still smiled warmly, still told her how long they had waited to see her. But the families, parents with tired eyes, children with hopeful smiles, looked at her with a deeper sense of trust, as if her new title gave her a new kind of armor to stand for them. One mother, holding her little boy's hand, whispered, "You give hope to people who need it." Catherine squeezed her hand gently. "The honor is mine." In the background, the royal guards positioned around the hospital entrance stood taller. Every time she greeted a child, they subtly shifted, ensuring every angle was protected. Their presence had always been symbolic, but now it carried a sharper edge. Protecting a queen consort meant protecting a future. Back at the palace, William played an equally critical role. He attended every briefing, reviewing new protocols, working closely with advisors to ensure Catherine's transition was smooth. It wasn't just love, though love certainly shaped every gesture. It was partnership, a partnership built across decades of challenges, triumphs, public scrutiny, and quiet, shared moments. One evening, as they sat together in a private lounge, William gently took her hand. "You were incredible today," he said quietly. Catherine leaned her head against his shoulder. "I hope I can do all of this justice." "You already are," he replied, kissing her forehead. "And you're not doing alone." But even with the support of family and the nation, the role demanded strength, absolute strength. Catherine spent hours reviewing documents, learning new ceremonial responsibilities, understanding constitutional boundaries, and preparing for her first meeting as Queen Consort with Commonwealth leaders. She was no longer simply stepping into rooms. She was entering them as a co-guardian of the crown. And the guards felt that shift as intensely as anyone. On the morning of her first official state briefing in her new role, the palace entrance was lined with guards from the household division. Their uniforms gleamed. Their posture was near perfect, almost statues carved from loyalty itself. As Catherine approached, the commander gave the order. Royal salute, present arms. Hundreds of rifles rose in one unified, thunderous motion. For a moment, Catherine paused. It was brief but real. The sound, the sight, the weight of their respect struck her not as a symbol of power, but of responsibility, of history, of trust. She placed her hand over her heart and bowed her head slightly. It was not required, but it was deeply felt, and it sent a ripple through the guards, one they would speak about quietly for years. Because sometimes a queen reveals her strength not through the crown she wears, but through humility. As days turned into weeks, the monarchy settled into its new era. Camilla gracefully stepped back, taking on her new role with dignity and peace. Charles continued guiding the crown with steady leadership. William leaned into his future role with growing confidence. But it was Catherine who became the quiet heartbeat of the institution. In schools, children began drawing pictures of Queen Catherine with bright crayons. In communities, people discussed her kindness and calm. In the press, analysts marveled at how smoothly she adapted. And around the palace, staff spoke of her with a kind of admiration normally reserved for legends. And the royal guards, they carried her presence in every step. When she walked, they watched the crowd with sharper eyes. When she traveled, they rode closer. When she waved the public, they shifted subtly to shield her. To guard a monarch is duty, but to guard someone the nation trusts, that is devotion. Months later, standing on the balcony of Buckingham Palace during her first major appearance as Queen Consort, Catherine looked out at a sea of cheering faces. Flags waved. Children hoisted on shoulders cheered. Elders wiped tears from her eyes. She glanced to her left, William smiling proudly. To her right, Charles watching with a soft, knowing expression. And directly below, rows of royal guards steadfast, unblinking, loyal. A new era had begun, not just for the monarchy, not just for Britain, but for Catherine, Queen Consort, mother, leader, symbol of grace. History had turned a page, and the world was watching as she wrote the next chapter.